Mr. Sternberg.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Brasso, Senator Bozeman, and members of the committee. It's an honor to be here, and we're grateful that you have included the voice of rural America in this hearing. Thank you, Senator Bozeman, for consistently listening to and helping rural Arkansas, including holding the first hearing on Senator Wicker and Senator Highcap's technical assistance bill, which is contained in today's legislation. And thank you as well for sponsoring their SRF win with Senator Booker. Rural and small town USA depends on this committee to ensure that the interests of rural communities are contained in federal legislation. The Great Compromise of 1787 that allows for proportional representation of states, including very rural states, in federal policy is alive and well in this committee and in your legislation. Thank you for that, Senator Brasso, Carper, Inhofe, and Cardin. Rural America is very appreciative for the very helpful and beneficial provisions in your water legislation. America's Water Infrastructure Act of 2018, and we urge its passage and enactment. My name is Dennis Sternberg, and I am the Executive Director of Arkansas Rural Water Association, a nonprofit association of small and rural community water and wastewater utilities in Arkansas. But I also am here representing the National Rural Water Association, which has over 31,000 member community utilities. We are very appreciative that your legislation includes numerous drinking water and clean water provisions that make the America's Water Infrastructure Act a comprehensive water legislative package. I would like to focus my comments on the important and beneficial provisions under Title V. Section 5004, Technical Assistance. Approximately 80% of the country's 14,500 wastewater utilities serve populations fewer than 10,000. As you know, small and rural communities have a much more challenging time complying with Federal Clean Water Act permits and operating complex wastewater systems due to the lack of technical resources in small communities. This legislation provides a solution to the lack of technical resources in small communities by providing technical experts, as we call them, circuit riders, in each state to be shared by small and rural communities. For these circuit riders to be effective and helpful, they must be able to directly travel to any given community to work specifically to solve any of their specific problems. Section 5010, the Water Workforce Investment. We welcome this new federal attention and emphasize mission for water workforce development. Like me, when I first started working, not every young person entering the workforce necessarily has the option to go to college. A college degree is of value, but is not required. True apprenticeship model would be a welcome enterprise for the water worker universe. In any given day, water workers may be operating heavy equipment to repairing broken lines, working with toxic chemicals, welding, conducting tests, operating process controls, complying with federal rules, managing construction, and the list goes on. Section 5011, Sense of Congress relating to the state revolving funds. Thank you for supporting the funding for the SRFs. They are essential in funding water infrastructure and projects to comply with the federal rules, especially the small and rural communities in our state and the country that have more difficulty affording service due to lack of population density. Section 5012, the GAO study on WIFIA projects. We hope the GAO will review the WIFIA program, considering it does not require any economic needs-based targeting, credit elsewhere means testing, or focus on compliance. Small and rural communities support Senator Bozeman and Senator Booker's SRF WIN Act, which improves WIFIA by authorizing an opportunity for states to direct some portion of the WIFIA funding to be used by each state's SRFs. Section 5006, Water Infrastructure Flexibility. We support the legislation for improving the current affordability analysis used by EPA to make compliance reasonable on tax or ratepayers, especially in economically disadvantaged populations. Under the Safe Drinking Water Act, EPA adopted a policy that families can afford annual water rates of 2.5% of the median household income, which adversely impacts rural communities that have higher percentages of people living in poverty and the lower modern MHI. This committee is very important to rural and small town America, and we are grateful for the opportunity to testify today for the attention and consideration you have provided in crafting this most recent legislation, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sternberg. I'd like to take a second to offer a group of support letters for the SRF WIN Act that we've been talking about, and some of you all have mentioned in your testimony. This includes the National Rural Water Association, the Council of Infrastructure Financing Authorities, the American Society of Engineers, the Associated General Contractors of America, the American Council of Engineering Companies, the National Association of Clean Water Agencies, Ducks Unlimited, the American Public Works Association, the Rural Community Assistance Partnership, the Water Systems Council, the International Union of Operating Engineers, the Vinyl Institute, the Hydraulic Institute, California Association of Sanitation Agencies, Orange County Water District. I'd also like to take a second and thank the EPA Office of Water, the Council of Infrastructure Financing Authorities, American Water Works Association, Water Environment Federation, and the Association of Metropolitan Water Agencies for providing us technical assistance to ensure that we preserve the WIFIA and SRF programs for years to come. Mr. Sternberg, let me ask you, the SRF has a great track record of handling SRF funding to address vitally important water issues, wastewater projects in the state for years. Rural states like Arkansas, though, have limited access to funding. Across the country, SRFs have thoroughly vetted projects from small, medium, and large communities that are waiting to be funded. Can you please explain what the additional funding created by another tool in the toolbox like SRF WIN, what would that mean for water infrastructure in rural America?
Thank you, Senator Bozeman. That's a great question. And let me just say, Arkansas Natural Resources Commission is the agency in Arkansas that handles SRF for the Safe Drinking Water Act and Clean Water Act, and they've done an excellent job. But there's still a need. And with this bill, you've got the SRF WIN in it, and that'll allow the WIFIA program to be much more helpful to some of the rural communities, such that we have in Arkansas, which is a very rural state, and many of your states are rural. But not only rural communities, we think it'll steer the WIFIA to look at the communities with the greatest economic need and communities that each state thinks is the priority. And giving the state the priority that handles SRF to say this project needs to be funded. And it also allows for that low interest rate to come through with the WIFIA funding. It'll be an excellent partnership with the SRFs, and it'll be excellent to the utilities across the state of Arkansas and the many states across the nation.
Mr. Sternberg, I thank you for once again testifying before our committee. Given your career working with the wastewater infrastructure, I'm sure you're familiar with unfunded federal mandates, specifically those communities facing expensive Clean Water Act compliance requirements related to stormwater and wastewater projects. In my home state of Nebraska, the city of Omaha was hit with a $2 billion unfunded federal mandate from the EPA to update its combined sewer overflow system. I was pleased to see my Water Infrastructure Flexibility Act included as Section 5006 in the bill before us, and I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that. The purpose of this section is to allow communities facing expensive stormwater and wastewater infrastructure updates to have greater flexibility to achieve compliance under the Clean Water Act. Mr. Sternberg, can you please discuss your experiences with communities that are forced to comply with expensive federal mandates? And will this section of the bill help alleviate some of the financial and structural burdens these communities are facing?
Thank you, Senator. My experience in Arkansas, there's about 700 community water systems, and then we have about 350-some wastewater systems. Arkansas, as in Nebraska, is a rural state. We have several, the majority of all systems in the nation, 14,500, serve less than 10,000. So when you start passing regulations from EPA down to comply with the same level as a large city such as Omaha, it's harder because you don't have the customer base to spread that cost across the board. It's very hard and financially on the system, the customers of the system, but it's got to be paid for some way or another. That's why a grant loan ratio. That's why we think also it needs to be more technical assistance put in for circuit riders. That's what we do. We go out there and work with these small systems and larger systems with our equipment. We do the I&I studies on their collection system. There's no need in building a brand new plant if you can fix the I&I. It's kind of like Ms. Swallow mentioned, the water loss that you have on leaks on water systems. Let's identify the problems and fix them. Don't build another well or another treatment plant because you got more leaks. It's the same way on the wastewater side. Let's be reasonable. Let's look at it. That's where the engineers do an excellent job identifying the problems on your utility to try to come in compliance. But we've always argued that, unfunded mandates, EPA states you need to do this, but they don't fund it. We've had the same problem on the EPA on our technical assistance funding. Back in 2012, it was put out through EPA that it has to go, no more earmarks. So in 2012, they had to go out and go through the process of bidding out all the technical assistance. There was several different pieces of legislation that was introduced to make EPA streamline and do it with the utilities that's deemed the most benefit with a nonprofit, whatever nonprofit is most beneficial to them. They haven't done that. EPA has not done that. And this Senate, members on this committee have wrote letters to EPA in regard to that about, you need to go back to this rule and do it this way, but they haven't done it. We have letters to back up the letter that the senator sent, and then EPA responded back.
We've seen a huge increase on these bills to the people in the city of Omaha, so I'm hopeful that the flexibility provided in this bill is going to help alleviate some of that hardship they're facing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sternberg, in your testimony, you highlighted in Section 5010, which contains the text of the Water Workforce Investment Bill, which Senator Booker and I have worked on. This provision establishes an EPA grant program to spur education, job training, and apprenticeship for careers. Can you speak a little bit? You mentioned this in your opening statement, but for a rural state like West Virginia, this is a huge challenge. Many of our folks that have been maintaining our water systems were under the old system and are retiring, and trying to find new and younger talent has been an issue for us. Could you speak to that, please?
Yes, thank you, Senator. National Rural Water actually started working with the Workforce Development Department of Labor on apprenticeships for the water industry. And this last year, we've just kicked it off, and each state is working through that process. But it's the same problem in our state. Aging workforce. We have an aging infrastructure for utilities. We also have an aging workforce as far as knowledgeable individuals that's run water and wastewater systems for years, and getting new young blood to come in to the industry. And one of the reasons I still believe it's the pay scale is not where it should be. It's the most important thing we do every day. Mm-hmm. Everybody has to have good, safe drinking water. Everybody has to have a process for disposal of your stuff. I mean, it does not make sense to me, but I think with this, it ignites and starts the process. And with this in the bill, I think it's an opportunity for every state to start expanding out and going into the workforce and bringing new people in.
Well, I have a small community in West Virginia where the person who was charged with keeping the water system running and providing the clean drinking water also was the person who checked the parking meters and took the notes at the city council meeting and
the dog catcher and everything.
The dog catcher and everything, and the way the requirements that we have now. You can't do that. I mean, you have to have the professionalization that goes along with this, which can be very complicated. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you for the addition in this bill for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, I've got three areas that, as I've listened to the opening statements and heard the responses to questions, that I think could use a little more elaboration. I know that Mr. Sternberg, and I wanted to tell you, you've got a real champion of rural water in Senator Bozeman. He's one that is always on that ball, and we agree with the problems. After all, Oklahoma and Arkansas are both rural areas. We're both impacted by how we do treat that. What I'd like to have you do is to anything you want to add to how this bill is going to be helpful specifically to the rural areas, give you the chance now to elaborate on that should you want to.
Thank you, Senator Inhofe, and we appreciate all your work from Oklahoma for rural water, and my counterpart, James Gamble, talks about you all the time, so thank you for the opportunity to add some additional stuff. My last comment would be on this bill is again, 14,500 water or wastewater systems throughout this nation in every state represent, and 10,000 population and under. They're the ones that rely on rural water technical assistance in the field, troubleshooting their problems that they have, because again, they don't have the expertise as larger systems where they have.
Or the resources. You know, when you
Exactly.
go around it, I know it's not any different in Arkansas
Nope.
than it is in Oklahoma. And when this hits them, they have no way of responding to it as it might in a major metropolitan area.
Exactly. So the technical assistance funding for the clean water, circuit riders is essential. It's essential. The Safe Drinking Water Act, has the circuit rider technical assistance provision of $12.7 million. EPA that's the issue that I have. EPA is a stumbling block because of how they've appropriated that money and put it out.
Okay, that's an excellent statement. I just want to make sure we had everything in the record that referred to
I
that.
have a letter that the senators here sent to EPA requesting that they.
I think it'd be appropriate to ask unanimous consent that that letter be made a part of the record at this point.
Without objection.